Redditors who go into people's houses for their job. What is the strangest, creepiest thing you've ever seen or experienced? Story 1. I used to volunteer for a wildlife rescue and did a pickup at a very elderly woman's house where she had found a baby. When I got there, she carefully uncovered it from the towel shed, placed it in, and it was just a chestnut. Story 2. I'm a pool guy. I go into people's backyards to clean their pools. One week, it was a 4-day week due to a holiday, so if they're not going on the scheduled days, I'm cramming 5 days of work into a 4-day week. It's a hot summer day, and I walk into the backyard of this house, get through both gates, and am met with an odd sight. These two kids, maybe 14 or 15, are absolutely but naked, cuddled on a poolside recliner. I look at them, they look at me, I immediately turn around, and they run inside. I see the owners all the time, but I've never seen these kids before. Next week I go, the wife was outside, and we started chit-chatting. I asked her if she's had any visitors recently. She says no. I'll let her know that I saw some kids in her backyard. And she cut me off. She says, "You're surprised you haven't met them. Let me introduce you. They were brother and sister. They canceled service within 2 months. Edit Reddit. Please stop. I don't want this being my top post. Please, E2 well." We did it Reddit. Story 3. A couple of years ago, I worked for a cleaning company. One of my first days on the job, I was cleaning a woman's house and entered a room on the second floor that, I kid you not, was full of only clocks and mirrors. I've never been so aware of my own mortality. Story 4. Dead body. Might not really be surprising here, but I still can't eat certain foods after experiencing it. And certain smells make me sick, too. I was working for a condo building, letting air conditioning guys look at units within condos. I was just a key holder. One of the last units of the day was a condo. Knocked on the door. No answer. Opened the door. Immediate waft of foul smell. Just some rotten eggs. Maybe enter the unit. See some moldy bread on the counter. Sweaty-looking cake condensation on the stove. It's pretty rank in here, I say to the guys. I look into the bedroom and see an older black woman with kinned off a bad blonde-eye job. Hunched over in bed, in a bit of yoga pose, sat up in bed, but head at feet, legs crossed, him immediately embarrassed. "Sorry, ma'am. I didn't know you were home." I said, "No movement." I take a step closer, "Ma'am. She's dead, dude." One of the air conditioning guys says, as he hurries out of the unit, his only evidence is the smell and my tone of voice when I said, "Ma'am." I step a little closer. The woman's skin is bruised and has moldy patches on it. This is not a yoga pose. This is a settling into the bed pose. Some facts I later learned from the police. She's a young Caucasian blonde woman, not an older black woman. Last diary entry 10 days prior, pill bottles, and last will and testament on the bedside table. Food, I can't eat wonton soup first thing I try to eat. 8 hours later, smell I can't handle dirty fridge, e.g. moldy items left by careless coworker. I also no longer fantasize about how cool the zombie apocalypse would be. Edit sorry for the Rorschach-esque narration. I'm on mobile, so that was the fastest way to tell the story. Funny side note, the 9 to 11 operator spent a full 2 minutes trying to get the security guard to touch the body to make sure she was not actually still alive. Also, I got the Employee of the Month award and a 100 gift certificate, though it was admittedly a slow month. Story 5. Back when I was a door-to-door salesman, I had a bunch of odd experiences, ranging from the mildly odd to the terrifying. One dude decided to give me a tour of the giant backyard shed he used for fermenting wine. It was actually pretty interesting. He explained a lot about how he did it and what it was like running a home winery. Didn't buy anything from me, though 2-1 dud did buy stuff from me. Waited until I stepped out to print him his receipt and was waiting for me wearing nothing but a very short bathrobe. That just so happened to fall open as he was receiving his receipt. He then asked if I'd like to stay for coffee. I did not stay for coffee. 3-1 dude invited me in, waited until ID walked in his front room, then locked the door and blocked the doorway. He then just started screaming at me. He was screaming about how you're right out of school, right? And you think you know everything, and you don't know? You're just a naive idiot, and you think you know the world. This went on for 5 minutes. He never physically touched me, but he screamed at me the entire time, and it was terrifying. Eventually, he let me leave. God, just leave, and I bolted out of there like a bat out of. I still wonder what that guy's deal was. Finally, one for me. I'm in insurance restoration. We deal with houses that are caught on fire or any insurance problem. Really long story short, a woman's house catches on fire. Woman has a deep freezer in the garage with the body of every cat she has ever owned since the 80s. Guess who stumbled upon it after the power had been out for a week? Story 6. Few years ago, I was volunteering with the city council, helping people clean their houses after the neighborhood I lived in had been flooded. One house belonged to a Chinese couple who ran the local convenience store. They had asked our crew to help remove water-damaged carpet from the ground floor rooms of their house, so it could be thrown away. As we were removing this carpet, we realized that it ran in one piece under a closed door and into a locked room. So we asked the lady of the house if she wanted us to cut it off at the door and leave whatever was in the locked room behind. or if she wanted to open the room and have us remove the carpet in there also. She responded, "We'll check with my husband what to do. That's his special room." This led to some nervously puzzled looks from our crew. What does a middle-aged Chinese man who owns a convenience store keep in his special room? Eventually, the wife came back with a set of keys and told us that we could remove the carpet in the room, and she unlocked the door. We all crowded around as the door opened to reveal a room with carpet up the walls, a mirror ball on the ceiling, a stage at one end with a PA standard sound system, a projector, and in the corner, just about the fanciest karaoke machine I'd ever seen. Special room indeed. Story 7, I used to install Dish Network for a living. I was installing for an elderly lady who complained that her sister's TV always showed the same thing hers did. I had a 2 TV installation order, so I figured that would be okay. I finished the installation and was demonstrating the system when she looked at the full-length mirror and complained that her sister's TV was still showing the same thing. Noped out of there as quick as I could and left notes on the account in case she called in. Story 8, I own and operate my own HVAC company, and that experience combined with working for other, larger contractors over the last 10 years has had me work in thousands of people's homes doing service and sales throughout a very large service area. I've been in homes ranging from multi-million-dollar homes where I don't even meet the owner because they want privacy to single wide trailers where there may have been a meth lab in the back room. Creepiest thing happened when I was in my very early 20s, fresh into the trade. Pulled up to a manufactured home, secluded in the backcountry, that had boarded windows and no stairs to the porch. Thinking I was at the wrong house, I started pulling away when a very large 30-year-old man comes running out yelling to me that I'm in the right place. I walk into the home and am overwhelmed with a putrid stench. The home isn't filthy, but it's cluttered into the point of borderline hoarder status. While I'm working on the furnace, the dude is playing Call of Duty on a 60 flat screen, at full volume bass on a very loud surround sound. Dude was so caught up in the action, he was screaming at the TV like he was in live combat. When I finish up diagnosing the problem, I walk into the living room and the dude looks at me like he forgot I was there with a terrified look on his face. I asked if I can talk to him for a minute so I can give him the rundown and quote. He walks up to me, and as I start explaining the work done, and quote, it's like I'm talking to a brick wall, complete nothingness in his eyes. After I finish talking, he just stares at me through an awkwardly long moment of silence. I kind of wave at him like, hey man, you were right. Eventually he snaps out of it and just hands me a credit card. So I tell him, okay, let me do the repairs and we'll square up the bill after. He nods, goes back to the couch, and cranks the cot again. I finish the work and walk back in the living room with the invoice, and this time he jumps up and yells, "What the man? You can't just walk up behind me like that." Dumbfounded, I apologize and let him know I'm done with the work. He signs the invoice. I give him his copy. He then apologies for blowing up and goes into normal human mode telling me about how he's a Middle Eastern war vet with PTSD and sometimes to be a bit edgy jumpy. He goes on to tell me that he lives out there alone with very minimal human contact and that I'm the first person he's seen in a long time. He then starts telling me more about himself and how his injuries sustained in the service keeps him confined to the house. I can tell he's enjoying the human contact at this point, so I hang around and bullshit with him for a bit. After a little while, he pulls out a bag of weed and mentions that he uses medical cannabis for relief. He asks me if I want to smoke one with him, and I politely decline, being as how I'm at work, need to drive, etc. He gets kind of offended, but I thank him and let him know I need to get going. He asks if I can just hang out for a minute longer, and feeling sympathetic, I oblige. Now this is where it gets really weird. The dude smokes down a couple bowls while holding relatively normal conversation. Then out of nowhere he starts going on about how his wife, family, and friends have basically abandoned him, and how much he resents all of them for it. Feeling legitimately bad for the dude, I continue to talk with him for a bit and try to steer the convo away from such a dark place. Now the dude is super baked, and out of nowhere I see that lifeless look in his eyes again. He stops talking and starts just staring at me again. Feeling a bit alarmed, I let him know I'd really better get going, when all of a sudden he says something along the lines of, "I see things, man." I reply, what do you mean?" He says, "Beings, man. Figures they're constantly watching me and make my life a living." Not knowing what to say, I just kind of reply something like, "Oh, that's up. Do you see a professional about this kind of thing?" He says something along the lines of, "I tried. They tell me that I'm the problem when I know it's not me. It's them, the beings. They're everywhere. They're all around us right now as we speak." I tell him, "No, brother. It's just me and you here right now. It's all good." He says, "Well, you can't see them." And I tell him, "No. Well, good man. It's just us." He starts getting a fiery look in his eye and says, "You're just like the rest of them, telling me I'm the crazy one. You all try to put me on this medication rather than just listen to me." Starting to feel spooked, I just tell him the kind of stuff like, "Hey, I'm on your side, my dude. And they're just trying to help you. I think you should trust your doctors, etc." So I start to kind of move toward the door and let him know I'm going to head out and that I hope he finds relief. He jumps up and goes off on me about how I'm just like the rest of them, and I'm just going to leave him up there all alone to die, feeling a combination of threatened and bad for the dude. Not knowing what to do, I just try to comfort him some more and de-escalate, as I can see he's still got that crazy look in his eye. He follows me toward the door, rambling more about the things he sees and how everyone is against him. I notice a small arsenal of guns right next to the door and start to go into panic mode like this dude might do something crazy. He then follows me outside, so I turn around and try to shake his hand and part ways. He starts walking to my side like he's going to try to get behind me. So I'm like, what the hell are you doing, dude? While he's still rambling nonsense, so I set a beeline for my truck to get the out of there. He followed me at a fast walking pace, still rambling as he stares me down as I get into my truck and reverse away as quickly as possibly. As I drive away, I still see him standing there looking like a crazy man. This happened probably 8 years ago, so I'm a bit blurry on some of the details, but it was probably one of the more unsettling experiences I've had. There was only a short period of time where, while talking to him, did I feel like we were actually communicating on a normal level. And after he got super stoned is when he just lost it. Not only was it unsettling, but it was sad. I still feel legitimately bad for this dude and hope he was able to find relief and happiness. I notified my office staff of what happened and that they may want to notify the proper authorities for a welfare check. And to my knowledge, they did, though I'm not sure if anything ever came of it. One thing is for certain, and that's anyone with a combination of severe PTSD, depression, and likely schizophrenia definitely shouldn't smoke cannabis. I'm a regular cannabis enthusiast myself, and am glad I didn't smoke with that dude because I really wouldn't have been able to handle that situation if I'd been stoned out of my mind. So yeah, that story ended up being a bit longer than I'd expected. I've had all sorts of crazy happen while working in people's homes, but that one really sticks out in my mind. Story 9, when I was young, we used to clean up after fires. The soot goes everywhere, so everything has to be cleaned. Insurance covers it. Even dildos, Polaroid nudes, and all other toys, we would have to go through their drawers and clean everything. And I always warned them. This was in the late 80s, so there was no internet then, but at that time, Polaroid nudes were popular. As for creepiest, I once had to attempt to clean a fancy chair that had had a rotting corpse on it for weeks. The chair was expensive, so we had to prove to the insurance company that it wasn't cleanable. Edit typo. Story 10, for 20 years, I've spent my summers designing home theater systems. After the installers finish, I go by the house a few days later to check on things. Fully 75 of the time, I hit play on the DVD player, starts playing, and yet I forget to check before hitting play every time. Not sure who's dumber, me or the clients. Oh, and the recent one. Went by the client's house to do the usual check-in. He showed me his wall of heroes in the foyer. It consisted of framed, autographed pictures of Charles Manson, Ted Bundy, and Henry Lee Lucas, and a few others I'm forgetting, plus some framed letters from them. Wall of heroes, indeed. Story 11, my wife is a physical therapist who does home health visits. She has seen several hoarders, people who have bizarrely huge collections of curios like snow globes, crosses, and one lady who had a disturbingly huge collection of Princess Diana memorabilia, several old guys who try to subtly proposition her for favors. Then there was the one old guy who was recovering from a knee replacement and flat out said something like, "I haven't had it in like 20 years. Is that something you do?" Crazy cat ladies, they are real, and sometimes their houses are infested with fleas. There was a lady who had experienced a stroke and had lost a good chunk of her impulse control as well as mobility on one side of her body. Every single time my wife saw her, there were 2 dildos on her kitchen counter in plain view of the living room where my wife worked with the patient. Story 12, when I was in college, I was a pizza delivery driver for a small local pizzeria in a very upscale area. I saw some weird and/or cool stuff, but this one stands out. This takes place over a couple of weeks while not out on a delivery. The drivers answer the phones to take orders. I took an order from an obviously drunk man. Fast forward a few days and take another order from the same guy. Again, he is very drunk. A few days later, I come into work, and there's a message posted by the phones to not take orders from the address of the drunk guy. He had written bad checks to pay for the pizzas he had ordered. He calls again, drunk. I tell him we cannot take his order because of the bad checks. He begs me. It sounds like he's crying. I say it's okay if he pays cash. He says he will. Another driver gets sent with the pizza and instructions to only accept cash. About 20 minutes later, the driver calls to say that the guy doesn't have any cash. The guy wants the driver to bring him to an ATM. I tell the driver just to come back. When the driver gets back, he's almost in tears. The guy is pathetic. He's wasted drunk, and there are bottles scattered all over his beautiful place. I put the pizza on top of the oven. Since after the shift we get to eat the mistakes, the guy calls back. He's crying, begging for food. I tell him there's nothing I can do. He says he hasn't eaten in however long. Again, I buckle and tell him we'll give him the pizza after the shift if nobody wants to eat it. A few hours later, the pizza is still on the oven, so I drive it over to the guy's house. I knock on the door. I can hear something going on inside, but no answer. As I turn to leave, the door opens and the guy invites me in. I try to decline. I just want to give him the food and leave, but he insists he wants to pay me. We walk into the kitchen, and there must be 100 empty vodka bottles. He pours himself another vodka, and he gets his checkbook. He offers me a drink, and I decline. He apologizes for the way he answered the door. He said hookers have been coming over and stealing from him in the middle of writing the check. We were making small talk. I don't recall exactly how, but I try to tell him he needs to get some help rehab. Suddenly, there's a knock on the door and gets really scared and shushes me. He said it's probably a hooker coming back to steal more. The door opens and a woman walks in. I'm really freaked now, thinking it's a murderous hooker. She's obviously freaked by my presence. It's his wife. She tells me she's his wife and wants to know who I am. I tell her I'm just delivering pizza. Once we get everything sorted out, she's a bit dubious but pleasant. She tells me the guy's sad story. He fell off the wagon. So she left him and knows all about the hookers, etc., and has frozen his money. She writes me a personal check for the pizza with a generous tip, which I cashed, and after giving the pizza place its cut, split the tip with the other driver, about $10 each. Fast forward a few days, I'm back at work, and the boss hands me a letter. It is from the woman thanking me to my boss. My kindness convinced her husband to go back into rehab. My boss asked what was I thinking. It was none of my business to get involved, got fired. TLDR, felt sorry for guy on 2-week bender. Get fired for my trouble. Edit, I just wanted to add a thanks to everybody for all of the kind comments and clarify a few things that in my attempt to keep it short may have been unclear when I was never quite sure why I got fired. I know it had to do with this, but in general my boss was a good boss and very open-minded. It was a dodgy situation that I got a driver into, and I walked into a dodgy situation too. Even though it was on my own time, what I remember most clearly about the conversation when I was shown the letter and fired was that my boss said that it was none of my business to, I didn't really do as much as I should have to encourage the guy to get help. I was in an uncomfortable situation with a drunk, and I didn't want him off. I think as a strange wife showing up when she did with a third, neutral person, there was probably more influential than anything said. Story 13, I used to do pest control. While baiting a house for roaches, I made my way to their bathroom. And on top of the toilet tank, there was a decorative bowl. Nothing out of the ordinary, right? Well, the bowl wasn't full of extra TP or washcloths. It was full of white cheddar Cheeto puffs. Story 14, not my job, but I guess I was working. Been divorced for a couple years, and I was helping my girlfriend move into a new apartment. I'm putting stuff away in a kitchen drawer, and I find a 15-year-old photo booth pic of my ex-wife and her sister. They look to be in their early teens. Just turns out my ex-sister-in-law was the previous tenant, and that was her junk drawer. Edit was creepy for about an hour. Showed it to the girlfriend, and asked if it was hers. She went to the same high school as me and the ex, so it might make sense. Nope. It was a basement apartment in a kind of wealthy dude's house. So next time I saw him outside, I showed him, and he confirmed his sister-in-law was his last renter. Mystery solved. Story 15, boiler repairs for sons in the house, playing Xbox, all mentally ill. Rooms 2 foot deep in takeaway trays. A duck and a rat loose in the other room. The mother was just in her underwear with a fresh kidney transplant scar around her middle. The hot pipe had snapped off the washing machine and was running the combi boiler flat out. She had tied the pipe into the sink. How long's it been like that for? I said. About 6 weeks, she said. The bottom had dropped out of the wall units because of the steam. The carpet in the duck rat room was sodden with, and I went into the lads' rooms. They never flinched or acknowledged me. One was holding the controller, but the TV was off. Story 16, I'm a firefighter EMT. So it's pretty normal to find a dead body, but one will always stay with me. There was this middle-aged guy who lived in his van out in a parking lot somewhat out of town. He never bothered anybody, so the police just let him stay there. It was around middle of July in Arizona, so about 105 to 110 degree heat, and we got a call to go check on him. Nobody had seen him for a while, and somebody had complained of a foul odor coming from his van. We all knew what we were going to find, but nothing could prepare us for what we actually came across. I opened the back door to his van, and a cloud of flies flew out so thick you couldn't see through it. I was immediately punched in the face by the stench of death, and when the flies cleared out, we finally got a look at what was in there. The guy had been dead for at least 2 weeks, and his cats had survived by eating the fleshier parts of his body. I've seen my fair share of dead bodies, but something about a guy who had been in a van for 2 weeks in Arizona summer heat with cats eating his body that just sticks with you. Story 17, babysitting. Kid wanted to watch this supposed kids movie. Was some Jewish kids show, some creepy guy in a teddy bear costume and a ton of makeup, had a really rapey vibe to it. I remember one part in particular was talking about Roman Caesars, because why not? And, of course, this creepy old guy was the Caesar, and all these little girls were around him like his freaking harem or something. There may or may not have been some light spanking involved. I just couldn't stop thinking about what must have been going on behind the scenes, worse than any horror movie. Story 18, not me, but my mom. She's a visiting physical therapist. She used to work in a small city in the area with some bad areas, and she had to do therapy for a rather overweight guy who was pretty paranoid about the people in his complex. Granted, most of us would be too, but my mom sat down on the couch and felt something hard underneath the cushion. She had the guy get what it was, and it was a stick with a large knife taped to the end. She had almost sat on the knife too. She asked him if there was anything else like that in or around the area she needed to work in, and he managed to remove multiple knives, makeshift spears, and a syringe-based weapon. He was HIV positive. My mom discharged him shortly. Story 19, I worked for a greenery in Great Neck, Long Island from 1994-96 when I was in high school. It was my first time being exposed to homes. We had a couple corporate clients. One was a brokerage called Stratton Oakmont. The new CEO was a guy named A.L. Lipsky, who was an ex-furniture salesman. That was weird, but everything was weird in that place. The owners got high 3x a day, and one of them sent me out for cranberry juice and a large cup of ice for his vodka as we closed shop. When Stratton got set up, our job was to furnish both it and the CEO's home, which was on a golf course. Those guys laughed and smoked and bragged about being able to legally steal from people. It was apparent that they all answered to this guy Jordan, who I only saw in passing. Okay, on to the creepy part of my senior year of high school. We had these two FBI agents come into my constitutional law class and talk to us about a career in law enforcement. The usual stuff, what it takes to get accepted, what skills are most valuable. During the QA, one agent confessed that his job wasn't glamorous drug busts, but crooked stock exchange trades. I raised my hand and asked if he meant guys like Stratton Oakmont. His face froze, and he coughed out a yes. I said, oh yeah, I know all those guys, not a humble teen. Sigh. After class the next day, my teacher kept me behind and said those guys wanted to talk to me. Now, it was my turn to freeze. I said no way, I was still 17, a minor, and I wasn't talking to anyone. 20 years later, they made that movie, The Wolf of Wall Street. I spent a lot of time in the home of the Jonah Hill character. Edit, there's another movie about Stratton Oakmont called Boiler Room with Giovanni Ribisi, Ben Affleck, and Vin Diesel. It's not as good as Wolf, but provide a very good look at what it was like for the guys making cold calls who never got to interact. W. Jordan DiCaprio. Story 20, part of my work is to go out and do in-home evaluations for the remodeling people want. Usually, but not always, they either come into our shop before the visit, or we talk about when they want to come in while we are scheduling a visit. This woman calls and wants to schedule a home visit. She hasn't been in and doesn't seem interested in coming in. Unusual. But whatever they call, I go out. She answers the door and is objectively beautiful. Slender, long dark hair, painted toenails, wearing a flowing dress. She invites me in, and all the curtains are drawn and shades are down. The house has nearly every wall and flat surface decorated with pictures of her and her husband, their wedding, their vacations. Everything is a display of their wedded bliss. There's also a long gun in a case, standing in one corner. I can't tell if it's a rifle or a shotgun, but it's there, and there's a Victoria's Secret bag on her dining room table. We proceed to have one of the most awkward discussions I've ever had in a house. She talks about all of the projects. We look at the kitchen, the downstairs bathroom, the stairs themselves, but somehow she doesn't talk about them like she's really going to do them. And the way she's talking to me is outrageously suggestive. And she is hot and ready to go. You have to understand that the worst thing a guy could do in my position would be to overinterpret a woman's interest while visiting her home. Bad, bad, bad. Beyond that, while I think I'm attractive, I could have been anybody. It's not like she came into the shop and liked me and then asked me to come out for an appointment. She just called in, and then she says we were having drinks with the neighbors across the street last night. Your company did some work over there. My girlfriend said that if I asked you, you would touch my carpet. My husband got really mad when he heard that. And then I got this vision that all this was a setup for their fantasy, where the husband comes home to find some guy banging his wife and grabs the gun in the corner and shoots him, and they have crazy on top of the body or something. But the vibe was out of control. So I said, do you want me to touch your carpet? And she said yes. And I said, well, okay, but that's extra. No, actually, I did not say that. I bailed. Later that day, she did come into the shop, but she was an angry mess, sniffling like she had just finished some coke. And I can't tell you how glad I managed not to get tangled up with her, despite the temptation. Story 21, construction inspector here. I was looking at a house about to be renovated by new buyers. The basement was all paneled walls, Spanish tile floors, and tons of animal heads mounted on the walls, very old-school hunting lodge style. Except there was also a room off the basement, behind a bookcase hidden door that I only noticed because I was trying to understand the relationship between the foundation and the main floor. Small room, maybe 80 SF. The ceiling had a single fluorescent fixture, recessed, with a heavy steel grating over it. The floor and walls were covered in sheet vinyl, and there was a single metal chair in a room. It was sitting over a floor drain. I noped the right out of there. The renovation never happened. The owners tore the house down and built a new one. I still can't drive by that site without feeling a chill. Story 22. I work in apartment complexes and constantly go into people's units. Once we were taking over a property, and doing this we had to go into every single apartment and room to check for the conditions of things. One of the apartments I went into had a room that was covered in nothing but pictures of ceiling fans. There was a bed in the middle of the room and a small computer monitor in a corner and hundreds of pictures of fans, big and small, all over the walls. Fans for magazines, fans printed out, fans. Story 23. My so is a repairman. He went on a call where the customer was about 45 to 50 years old and huge. I guess the customer kept talking about his wife that. While my so was working, the guy walks away and comes back and starts talking in a high-pitched voice about his husband. Apparently, he had suffered from a TBI, and now sometimes thought he was a man with a wife and a woman with a husband. My so said he felt so creeped out, like the guy was going to lock him in a basement or something. Story 24. I used to be a mover. One day a few years ago, I was moving an older lady, probably in her late 60s. I went in the master bedroom with my coworker, and when we lifted the mattress and box spring, there was a handmade clay bowl with little hand-made clay people having in various positions around the rim. Snapped a pic before she walked in and got out of there with the mattress. When I came back, the bowl was gone, and the lady apologized for what we had seen, very red-faced. Story 25. My sister does deliveries for a small pharmacy. Before one of her first deliveries, her boss told her that if she couldn't handle the smell, she didn't have to go inside. Well, this woman was bedridden and had been shitting in a trash can next to her bed. There was also a dead cat decomposing in the living room. Story 26. A friend of mine used to be a plumber. He told me about one woman who hadn't noticed she had in her hair. They were in her house for hours, trying their best not to burst out laughing every time she left the room with it still stuck to her hair. I can only imagine the look on her face when she finally looked in the mirror after they'd gone. Story 27. Work in restoration construction. There was an old lady who still had the plate that she had fixed for her husband on the counter for him. When he got home, she told us it had been there for like 7 years. It was really gross looking. Also, the whole rest of the house she kept exactly like it was on the day he died. Same towel hanging on the bathroom door, his work shirt laying in the hallway floor. As we worked, she kept a close eye on us to make sure that we moved nothing. She was adamant about the whole situation. It was really creepy. The lady was nice, though. She just had a screw loose upstairs. Story 28. I used to help my grandma clean houses. It was mainly old folks who kept everything clean themselves, but would pay my grandma and I to touch up, dust things they couldn't, do the more strenuous cleaning such as floors and bathrooms, etc. But their WS1 house, that was a living nightmare. Her name was Jean. Jean was a power hoarder. She put those people on that hoarding show to shame. She had 50 years of junk piled high. But she had one room I refused to go into, her toy room. This woman had a large room toward the back of her house, filled with toys through the decades. Those clapping monkeys, the dead-eyed porcelain dolls, rocking horses, life-size rag dolls, all of it. But these toys were in a poor, circulated room. With large windows, the sun would shine through from late noon until sundown. These toys were nightmare fuel. Covered in dust, sun faded, some were close to falling apart. The clapping monkeys sometimes banged their little cymbals in their dying effort to scare the out of me. The ragdolls with their little yarn hair and dead eyes were the worst. I walked into that room once as soon as I seen the monstrosities in there. I noped the out of there. I only cleaned Jean's house twice after that. She was one weird lady. I used to work for my dad trimming trees. One day we have our trucks parked in this little cul-de-sac, and I'm loading branches into the bed when I notice a minivan parked on the street a little ways ahead of us. In the middle row, I see the outline of a head and shoulders, adult size. I keep an eye on them as I toss the branches, but the person never moves. I live in a desert, and it was the middle of summer. It was hot, and the windows were up. I was a teen at the time and a huge chicken, so I didn't want to actually approach the van. So I keep working and wait for my dad to climb out of the tree. The truck was loaded by the time he got down, and I point out the van and ask him to check it out. He stood back with me and did the same cautious, distant peering that I'd been doing for the last 20 minutes without getting anywhere near the car. Finally, he turns and says, "Let's take this load out. And if they're still there when we get back, we'll check on them. Apparently chicken is genetic." So about half hour later, we're driving back to the job, and we have to go in such a way that we would have to drive past the van, flip a U-turn, and then park behind it. As we approach, I can still see the silhouette, and it still hadn't moved. I started to get more and more nervous as we approach. Then I looked in the window, and staring back at me was the peeling face of a zombie. These crazy hauled a Halloween prop around with them to cheat the HOV lane.